People think English teachers spend their evenings grading papers and writing profound thoughts about literature. The truth is, I mostly sit in my kitchen at 10 p.m., drinking cheap bourbon and calculating how much a divorce lawyer costs per hour. Tonight was no different, except for the credit card statement spread across my maple table like evidence at a crime scene. My name is Eli Granger, and I teach high school English in Millfield, Maine. Population 3,400, where everyone knows everyone's business except, apparently, your own wife's extracurricular activities. Dad, you look like someone pissed in your cornflakes. My 15-year-old son Ben shuffled into the kitchen, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles. The kid had inherited my sarcasm, but thankfully his mother's looks. Language, Ben. I folded the statement, but not before circling another charge from Serenity Springs Spa. $200 for a deep tissue massage with aromatherapy enhancement. Jessica had been getting a lot of those lately. Where's Mom? Ben grabbed a soda from the fridge, his eyes already knowing the answer. Working late at the spa again. Big client event. I took another sip of bourbon, feeling it burn away the bitter taste of my own words. Ben nodded, that knowing look passing between us. At 15, he was old enough to notice his mother's increasingly creative explanations for her absences. Sure she is. The front door opened with Jessica's familiar jingle of keys and designer heels clicking across our hardwood floor. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Auburn hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless despite her long day, wearing a silk blouse that cost more than my weekly salary. Hey, you two. She kissed the air near my cheek, her perfume different from this morning. Heavier, muskier. Sorry I'm so late. We had that corporate wellness group and they wanted the full treatment package. Must have been exhausting, I said, watching her carefully. All that, hands-on customer service. Jessica's green eyes flickered, but her smile never wavered. You know how it is. The customer is always right. She moved to the refrigerator, her movements just a little too casual. Ben, homework done? Yeah, Mom. Just like every night you ask. Ben's tone carried that teenage edge that said more than his words. I'm going to check on Lila, Jessica announced, already heading upstairs. Our 11-year-old daughter would be fast asleep, but it gave Jessica an excuse to escape. Ben waited until her footsteps faded before speaking. Dad, you know she's lying, right? I looked at my son, this kid who was growing up too fast in a house full of unspoken truths. What makes you say that? Come on, the spa closes at 8. It's almost 11. And she smells like... He wrinkled his nose. Like Guy Cologne. Smart kid. Too smart. Ben, your mother works hard to build her business. Right. He crushed his empty soda can with more force than necessary. Just like Todd Larkin works hard to help her build it. Todd Larkin. Jessica's business partner at Serenity Springs Spa. Former high school quarterback, current fitness instructor / massage therapist / whatever the hell else Jessica needed him to be. The guy had the personality of a golden retriever and the intelligence to match, but he looked like he'd stepped off a fitness magazine cover. What do you know about Todd? I tried to keep my voice neutral. Ben shrugged. Just that he's always around. Picks Mom up for those business meetings, calls the house a lot. He paused. And Mrs. Patterson saw them at Romano's last week. Said they looked pretty cozy for business partners. Mrs. Patterson was our neighbor, a 70-year-old retired librarian with eyes like a hawk and a mouth like a megaphone. If she'd seen Jessica and Todd together at the nicest restaurant in town, half of Millfield knew about it by morning. People talk, Ben. Doesn't mean anything. Yeah, Dad. Sure. He headed toward the stairs, then stopped. For what it's worth, I think you deserve better. After Ben disappeared upstairs, I sat alone with my bourbon and my thoughts. The credit card statements told a story I'd been trying not to read. Expensive lunches, hotel charges in Portland when Jessica claimed to be at spa conferences, lingerie purchases from stores I'd never seen her shop at. My phone buzzed. A text from Lucas Martinez, my best friend and the high school's gym coach. Drink tomorrow? Heard some interesting gossip at the gym today. Lucas had been my roommate in college, my best man at my wedding, and the only person in town who'd tell me the truth even when it hurt. If he wanted to talk, it wasn't about sports scores. I typed back, "How interesting." The kind that requires whiskey and a private conversation. Jessica came back downstairs, having changed into silk pajamas that probably cost more than my car payment. Lila's sleeping like an angel. She asked where you were earlier. I was here. Grading papers, paying bills. I gestured to the credit card statement, watching her reaction. Her eyes flicked to the papers, but she didn't flinch. Oh, good. Everything look okay? Depends on your definition of okay. Lot of spa charges lately. Business expenses mostly. You know how it is when you're building something from the ground up. She moved behind my chair, her hands settling on my shoulders. Todd and I are working so hard to make this place successful. Todd and I. Always Todd and I these days. I'm sure you are. I reached up and covered her hand with mine. Her wedding ring was loose. She'd lost weight recently, claimed it was from all the stress of running a business. Jessica, can I ask you something? Of course. But her hands tensed under mine. Are you happy? I mean, really happy? With us? With this life we've built? She was quiet for a long moment. That's a strange question, Eli. Is it? We barely talk anymore. You're always at the spa, always with Todd, always somewhere else. I feel like I'm married to a ghost. Jessica pulled her hands away and moved to face me. I'm building something important. The spa is my dream, you know that. I thought you supported me. I do support you. I just miss you. The kids miss you. The kids are fine. Ben's practically grown and Lila adores the independence. She crossed her arms. Maybe the problem isn't that I'm working too much. Maybe the problem is that you're not working hard enough. There it was. The subtle dig. The way she could make me feel small without raising her voice. 20 years of marriage, and she'd perfected the art of making her failures my fault. You're right, I said finally. Maybe I should work harder. Pay more attention to what's going on around me. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, guilt, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. I'm going to bed, she announced. Early day tomorrow. Todd and I are interviewing new massage therapists. Of course they were. After she left, I poured another bourbon and opened my laptop. Serenity Springs Spa had a website with glowing reviews and professional photos of their facilities. There was Jessica in her white coat, looking like a medical professional. And there was Todd, shirtless in several shots, demonstrating various massage techniques on anonymous clients. I clicked through their services menu. Deep tissue massage, hot stone therapy, couples massage, private consultation rooms. The prices were steep for a small Maine town, but they seemed to have plenty of customers. I was about to close the laptop when I noticed something. Their corporate wellness page advertised team-building retreats, executive stress relief packages, and after-hours private events for businesses wanting to reward their employees. After-hours private events. I picked up my phone and scrolled through Jessica's recent excuses. Corporate wellness group tonight, executive retreat last Thursday, team-building event the week before. Always after hours, always requiring Todd's personal attention, always running late. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. This is Paula from the spa. I think you should know what's really going on during those private events. Meet me tomorrow at Murphy's Diner, noon. Come alone. Paula. I remembered her, young, maybe 25, worked the front desk at Serenity Springs. Blonde, nervous energy, always seemed like she was holding back something she wanted to say. I stared at the text for a long time, then deleted it. but I'd already memorized every word. Upstairs, I could hear Jessica moving around our bedroom, probably getting ready for another restless night of sleeping as far from me as possible without falling off the bed. We used to sleep tangled together like teenagers. Now we were like polite strangers sharing a hotel room. I finished my bourbon and made a decision. Tomorrow I'd meet Paula, I'd talk to Lucas, and I'd start paying very close attention to my wife's business practices. Because if Jessica thought she could play me for a fool, she was about to learn that English teachers know how to read between the lines. Murphy's Diner sat on Main Street like a time capsule from 1952, complete with red vinyl booths and a waitress named Dolores, who'd been pouring coffee there since the Carter administration. I arrived 5 minutes early and chose a corner booth with a view of the door, feeling like a character in one of those noir novels I taught in my American literature class. Paula showed up exactly at noon, looking around nervously before sliding into the seat across from me. She was prettier than I'd remembered, but there was something fragile about her, like she might shatter if someone spoke too loudly. "Thanks for coming," she said, wrapping her hands around a coffee mug like it was a life preserver. "Thanks for reaching out. Though I have to admit, I'm not sure what this is about." Paula glanced around the diner, then leaned forward. "It's about your wife and Todd. And what they're really doing during those private events." My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice steady. "What do you mean?" "Look, Mr. Granger, I need this job. My mom's sick, and I can't afford to lose the income. But what they're doing, it's not right, and you seem like a decent guy." "Paula, just tell me what you know." She took a shaky breath. "The private events aren't corporate wellness sessions. They're parties, adult parties. Your wife and Todd, they host these things for couples who want to experiment." The coffee in my mouth turned to acid. Experiment how? Swinging. Partner swapping. Sometimes it's just Todd giving special massages to the wives while the husbands watch. Sometimes it's more. She couldn't meet my eyes. "Your wife, she's usually right in the middle of it." I set down my coffee cup carefully, afraid I might throw it across the room. "How long has this been going on?" "About 6 months. Maybe longer. I only found out by accident when I came back one night to get my purse. I heard sounds from the private massage room. When I looked through the keyhole, I saw your wife and Todd with this couple from Portland. They were all..." She trailed off, her cheeks flushing red. "All what, Paula?" "Naked, and doing things that definitely weren't therapeutic massage. The diner suddenly felt too small, too hot. I loosened my tie, trying to process what she was telling me. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it's not just the parties. Todd's been bragging to some of the other guys at the gym. Says he's got your wife wrapped around his finger, that she'll do anything he wants. He called you a clueless loser who's too busy grading papers to notice his wife's getting the best sex of her life." The words hit me like physical blows. I'd suspected the affair, but hearing about Jessica's public humiliation of our marriage was somehow worse. "There's more," Paula continued. "They're planning something big for this weekend. Some kind of special event. Todd was laughing about how you'd never suspect anything because Jessica told you she was going to some spa conference in Boston. Jessica had mentioned the conference. Said she'd be gone all weekend, needed to network with other spa owners, expand her business knowledge. I'd even offered to drive her to the airport. "Paula, I need proof. Photos, recordings, something concrete." She nodded like she'd expected this. "I can get you into the spa tomorrow night. There's a back entrance through the storage room. I'll leave it unlocked." She pulled a small key from her purse. "This opens the office. Jessica keeps a computer there with client files, scheduling, everything, and there's a security camera system." I took the key, feeling its weight like a loaded gun. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" Paula's eyes filled with tears. "Because my dad cheated on my mom for years, and everyone knew except her. When she finally found out, it destroyed her. She never recovered. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. Nobody deserves that. Nobody deserves to be made a fool of by the person they love. After Paula left, I sat in the diner for another hour, staring at the key and thinking about 20 years of marriage. Jessica and I had met in college, both of us studying business before I switched to education. She'd been ambitious even then, talking about opening her own company, being her own boss. I'd admired that drive, supported her dreams even when they meant sacrifices for our family. When had it all gone wrong? When had supporting her dreams become enabling her betrayal? My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Conference is going great. Learning so much. Miss you and the kids. XOXOI stared at the message, then typed back, miss you too. Learn everything you can. That evening, I met Lucas at Flanagan's Pub, a dark little place on the outskirts of town where teachers and coaches could drink without running into students or parents. Lucas was already there, nursing a beer and looking grim. So, he said as I sat down, how much do you know about your wife's business? Apparently not enough. You first. Lucas sighed. I've been hearing things at the gym. Guys talking about this place where married couples go to. Spice things up. Swinging parties, that kind of thing. They call it couples therapy, but it's not the kind that involves talking. And you think this place is Jessica's spa? I know it is. Tommy Brennan was bragging about it last week. Said he and his wife went to this private massage session where they got to interact with the staff. When I pressed him for details, he clammed up, but he mentioned Serenity Springs specifically. Tommy Brennan owned the hardware store and had been married to his high school sweetheart for 30 years. The idea of him and Martha at some kind of sex party would have been funny if it wasn't happening at my wife's business. There's more, Lucas continued. Todd's been telling anyone who'll listen that he's got something big planned. Some kind of grand finale that's going to set him up for life. He's been talking about opening his own place, maybe in Portland or Boston. With what money? That's what I was wondering. Guy makes maybe $30,000 a year as a massage therapist, but he's been flashing cash lately, talking about investments, business opportunities. Lucas leaned forward. Eli, I think your wife might be financing more than just Todd's massage career. I told Lucas about my conversation with Paula, about the key, about Jessica's supposed conference in Boston. By the time I finished, Lucas was shaking his head. Jesus, Eli, I'm sorry. I hoped I was wrong. You weren't wrong. I was just blind. I finished my beer in one long gulp. But not anymore. What are you going to do? I'm going to find out exactly what my wife has been up to. And then, I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows the truth about Serenity Springs Spa. Lucas studied my face. You sure about this? Once you go down this road, there's no coming back. There's already no coming back, Luke. Jessica made sure of that when she decided to turn our marriage into a joke. I stood up, feeling more determined than I had in months. The only question now is whether I'm going to be the punchline or the one telling the joke. The next evening, I told Ben and Lila I had to run some errands and would be back late. Ben gave me a knowing look, but didn't ask questions. Lila was too absorbed in her homework to care. I drove to Serenity Springs Spa at 9 p.m., an hour after their official closing time. The parking lot was empty, except for Jessica's BMW and Todd's pickup truck. I parked across the street and waited, watching the building for signs of activity. At 9:30, a silver Mercedes pulled into the lot, followed by a red Audi. I recognized the Mercedes. It belonged to Dr. Richard Hayes, a dentist who lived in the expensive part of town. The Audi was unfamiliar, but through my binoculars, I could see it carried a middle-aged couple dressed like they were going to a fancy restaurant. More cars arrived over the next 20 minutes. By 10 p.m., there were 8 vehicles in the lot, including a Lexus I recognized as belonging to the mayor's wife. I gave them time to get settled, then made my way to the back of the building. Paula had been as good as her word. The storage room door was unlocked. I slipped inside, using my phone's flashlight to navigate between boxes of towels and massage oils. The office was exactly where Paula had said it would be. Jessica's computer was password protected, but I knew my wife well enough to guess her login. Serenity, 2019, the year she'd opened the spa. The computer opened like a book of secrets. Client files, appointment schedules, and a folder labeled private events that made my blood run cold. There were photos, videos, detailed records of who attended which sessions and what services they'd requested. I scrolled through months of documentation, my disgust growing with each file. Jessica hadn't just been cheating. She'd been running a full-scale sex business, using the spa as a front for prostitution and swinging parties. Todd wasn't just her lover. He was her business partner in the most literal sense. But the worst part was the financial records. Jessica had been skimming money from our joint accounts, using our mortgage as collateral for business loans, even forging my signature on documents. She wasn't just betraying our marriage, she was stealing our family's future. I was so absorbed in the files that I almost missed the sound of voices in the hallway. The private event was ending, clients heading home after their evening of therapeutic massage. I quickly copied everything to a flash drive, then made my way to the security office Paula had mentioned. The camera system was more sophisticated than I'd expected, with feeds from every room in the building. I could see Jessica and Todd in the main massage room, cleaning up after whatever had just happened there. Jessica was laughing at something Todd had said, her face flushed and happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. She looked like a woman in love, and it wasn't with me. I copied the security footage from the past 3 months, then made my way back to the storage room. As I reached the door, I heard Jessica's voice in the hallway. "Same time next week? The Hendersons want to try the couples package, and I think Doctor. Hayes is ready for something more adventurous." Todd's voice was lower, but I caught his words. "What about your husband? You sure he doesn't suspect anything?" Jessica's laugh was cold and dismissive. "Eli? Please. He's so buried in his books and papers he wouldn't notice if I brought clients home. Besides, he's getting exactly what he deserves, a wife who's finally living her life instead of playing house with a small-town nobody." I stood frozen in the storage room, listening to my wife of 20 years dismiss me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. The woman I'd loved, supported, built a life with, thought I was a small-town nobody who deserved to be betrayed. She was about to learn that this small-town nobody had been paying very close attention. Saturday morning, Jessica left for her conference in Boston with 2 suitcases and a kiss on my cheek that felt like a slap. I waved goodbye from our front porch, playing the role of the supportive husband while she drove off to spend the weekend with Todd at some resort in New Hampshire, a detail I'd learned from the credit card records I'd found on her computer. "Dad, you look like you're planning something," Ben said from behind me. I turned to find both kids watching me with identical expressions of curiosity and concern. "What makes you say that?" "You've got that look," Lila chimed in. "Like when you're planning one of your surprise lessons that make the seniors cry." Smart kids. They'd inherited Jessica's intelligence along with her looks, but they'd gotten my sense of justice too. "How would you two feel about spending the weekend at Uncle Lucas's house?" Ben's eyes narrowed. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to have some conversations with people. Adult conversations that you don't need to hear." "About Mom," Lila said quietly. It wasn't a question. I knelt down to her level, looking into eyes that were too wise for an 11-year-old. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, sweetheart. Big mistakes that hurt the people they love. When that happens, other grown-ups have to make some hard decisions." "Is Mom in trouble?" she asked. "Mom made some choices that are going to have consequences. But no matter what happens, you and Ben are the most important things in my life. That will never change." Ben stepped closer, putting his hand on my shoulder. "Dad, whatever you're planning, just don't do anything that'll make us lose you too, okay?" The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the chest. These kids had already lost their mother to her selfishness and lies. They couldn't lose me to revenge, no matter how justified it might be. I promise you, I'm not going to do anything illegal or dangerous, but I am going to make sure the truth comes out. People deserve to know what kind of business your mother has really been running. After dropping the kids at Lucas's house, I spent Saturday afternoon making phone calls. The first was to Tommy Brennan at the hardware store. Tommy, it's Eli Granger. I need to ask you about some services you might have received at my wife's spa. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, Eli, I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, Tommy. I think you and Martha have been attending some private events at Serenity Springs, events that involve more than therapeutic massage. Jesus Christ, Eli, how did you… He stopped himself, but it was too late. Tommy, I'm not calling to shame you or cause problems for your marriage. I'm calling because my wife has been running an illegal business and using our family's money to finance it. I need to know how many people are involved. Another long pause. What do you want from me? The truth. How long has this been going on? How many couples are involved? And what exactly has Jessica been offering? Tommy's story came out in halting, embarrassed bursts. The private events had started as legitimate couples massage sessions, but Jessica and Todd had gradually introduced more interactive elements. What began as sensual massage had evolved into full-scale swinging parties, with Jessica and Todd as active participants. She said it was therapeutic, Tommy insisted, that it would help marriages by removing inhibitions and exploring fantasies in a safe environment. And you believed that? Look, Eli, Martha and I have been married 30 years. Things had gotten routine. When Jessica offered these sessions, it seemed like a way to reconnect. By having sex with other people? It wasn't supposed to be about sex. It was supposed to be about intimacy, about breaking down barriers. Tommy's voice cracked. But then Todd started suggesting more extreme activities, and Jessica went along with everything. Before we knew it, we were in way over our heads. I made similar calls to 3 other men whose names I'd found in Jessica's client files. Each conversation followed the same pattern: initial denial, gradual admission, and finally a flood of guilt and justification. All of them had been drawn in by Jessica's promises of marital improvement and therapeutic benefits. All of them had ended up paying hundreds of dollars to watch their wives have sex with Todd, while Jessica coordinated the activities like some kind of perverted cruise director. By Sunday evening, I had statements from 6 couples and enough evidence to shut down Serenity Springs permanently. But I wasn't satisfied with just closing the business. Jessica had humiliated me publicly, stolen from our family, and destroyed our marriage. She deserved consequences that matched the scope of her betrayal. I spent Sunday night preparing for Jessica's return, printing photos from the security footage, organizing financial records, and writing a detailed timeline of her activities. When she walked through our front door Monday evening, I was waiting in the living room, with everything spread across the coffee table like a prosecutor's exhibit. Eli, I missed you so much. She dropped her suitcases and moved toward me with arms outstretched, but stopped when she saw the papers. What's all this? Sit down, Jessica. We need to talk. She remained standing, her eyes scanning the documents. I watched her face change as she recognized bank statements, client files, and security photos. Where did you get these? Does it matter? What matters is what they show. I picked up a photo of her and Todd with Dr. Hayes and his wife in what was clearly a compromising position. Explain this to me, Jessica. Explain how this is therapeutic massage. Jessica's composure cracked for just a moment before she rebuilt it. You broke into my business. You violated my privacy. Your business? You mean our business, since you've been using our joint accounts to finance it. Or did you think I wouldn't notice the $50,000 you've transferred out of our savings? That money was an investment in our future. Our future? Or your future with Todd? I stood up, moving closer to her. I know about the resort in New Hampshire, Jessica. I know about the fake conference. I know about everything." She backed away from me, her face pale but her chin raised defiantly. "So what if I did? So what if I found someone who appreciates me, who sees my potential instead of treating me like a housewife?" "You're not a housewife, Jessica. You're a prostitute. You've been selling sex and calling it therapy, using our home as collateral for a brothel." The word hit her like a slap. "How dare you!" "What Todd and I built is a legitimate business, helping couples explore their relationships. By fucking them for money. By providing services that their boring, repressed spouses couldn't." Her mask was completely off now, revealing the contempt she'd been hiding for years. "You want to know the truth, Eli? Yes, I'm having an affair. Yes, I love Todd. And yes, I've been planning to leave you for months." "Then why didn't you just ask for a divorce?" "Because I needed time to build financial security. The spa is worth more than this house, more than your pathetic teacher's salary could ever provide. I was building a real life, not this small-town mediocrity you're so satisfied with." I sat back down, suddenly feeling very calm. "You're right, Jessica. You have been building something. You've built a criminal enterprise that's going to cost you everything." "What are you talking about?" I picked up my phone and showed her the screen. "I'm talking about the email I sent to the state licensing board this morning, and the one I sent to the IRS about your unreported income, and the one I sent to Detective Morrison about your prostitution business." Jessica's face went white. "You didn't." "I did. I also sent copies of all your client files to the Millfield Gazette. Turns out our local newspaper is very interested in a story about prominent citizens engaging in illegal sexual activities at a business that's been operating without proper permits. Eli, you can't do this. Think about Ben and Lila. Think about what this will do to them." "I am thinking about them. I'm thinking about how their college funds have been depleted to pay for your sex parties. I'm thinking about how their mother has been lying to them for months. I'm thinking about how they deserve better than a family built on fraud and adultery." Jessica collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to pack your things and leave. Tonight. I want you to sign over your parental rights and agree to an uncontested divorce. And I want you to understand that if you ever try to contact my children again, I'll make sure everyone in this state knows exactly what kind of person you really are." "They're my children too." "No, they're not. Not anymore. You gave up that right when you chose Todd over your family." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet street where normal families lived normal lives. "The kids are staying with Lucas tonight. By the time they come home tomorrow, I want you gone." Jessica tried to argue, to negotiate, to seduce me back into complicity, but I was done listening to her lies. 20 years of marriage had ended the moment I saw those security videos, the moment I heard her dismiss me as a small-town nobody who deserved to be betrayed. She packed 2 suitcases and left without saying goodbye to Ben and Lila. I watched from the window as Todd picked her up in his truck, both of them looking like criminals fleeing a crime scene, which I suppose they were. The Millfield Gazette published their story on Wednesday morning under the headline, "Local Spa Investigated for Illegal Activities." By noon, every person in town had read about Serenity Springs' private events and the prominent citizens who'd participated in them. The article was carefully worded to avoid libel lawsuits, but it left no doubt about what had been happening behind the spa's closed doors. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. and didn't stop until I turned it off at midnight. Reporters from Portland and Boston wanted interviews. Parents demanded explanations about why their children's English teacher was involved in a sex scandal. The school board called an emergency meeting to discuss my employment status. But the call that mattered most came from Detective Morrison at 3 p.m. "Mr. Granger, we need to talk. Can you come down to the station? I'd been expecting this." "Am I under arrest?" "No, but we need to discuss how you obtained the evidence against your wife's business." The police station was a small brick building that served 3 towns and rarely dealt with anything more serious than drunk driving or domestic disputes. Detective Morrison was a woman in her 40s who'd moved to Maine from Boston after burning out on big city crime. She had the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much human stupidity. "Mr. Granger, I want to be clear about something from the start. Your wife and her partner are in serious legal trouble. We're looking at charges of operating a brothel, tax evasion, and fraud. But the way you gathered evidence raises some questions about illegal search and seizure. I used a key that was given to me by an employee who had legitimate access to the building. Paula Stevens. Yes, we've spoken to her. She's confirmed your story." Detective Morrison leaned back in her chair. "Here's the thing, though. You've essentially destroyed the lives of a dozen prominent citizens based on evidence that might not be admissible in court. Those citizens destroyed their own lives by paying for illegal sexual services. I just documented what was already happening. Fair enough. But some of these people are claiming they were coerced, that your wife and Todd Larkin pressured them into activities they didn't want to engage in. This was news to me." "Coerced how?" "According to Dr. Hayes and several others, your wife recorded their activities without consent and threatened to release the videos if they stopped coming to the private events. Essentially, she was blackmailing her own clients." I sat back in my chair, stunned. Jessica's business hadn't just been illegal, it had been predatory. She'd lured couples in with promises of marriage therapy, then trapped them in an escalating cycle of sexual exploitation and financial extortion. "Detective Morrison, I had no idea about any blackmail. I was just trying to document my wife's affair." "I believe you. And frankly, what you did probably saved several families from continued victimization." She pulled out a file folder thick with documents. "Your wife and Todd Larkin were arrested this morning in New Hampshire. They're fighting extradition, but they'll be back in Maine within the week." "What kind of charges are they facing?" "Multiple felonies. Operating a brothel, extortion, tax evasion, fraud. Todd's also looking at rape charges from a client who says she was drugged during one of the sessions." Detective Morrison closed the file. "Mr. Granger, I want you to understand something. What your wife did to you was terrible, but what she did to this community was criminal. You may have saved lives by exposing her." I left the police station feeling numb. I'd wanted revenge against Jessica for her betrayal, but I'd uncovered something much darker than adultery. My wife hadn't just been cheating. She'd been running a criminal enterprise that victimized vulnerable couples and exploited their private shame for profit. The school board meeting that evening was held in the high school auditorium, packed with parents, teachers, and curious townspeople. Principal Margaret Harlow, a stern woman who'd been running Millfield High for 20 years, called for order as I took my seat at the defendant's table. "We're here to discuss the employment status of Eli Granger in light of recent allegations and media coverage," she announced. "Mr. Granger, would you like to make a statement?" I stood up, looking out at faces I'd known for years. Some showed sympathy, others suspicion, most just curiosity about how this scandal would unfold. 20 years ago, I came to this school because I believed education could change lives. I've tried to teach your children to think critically, to question what they're told, and to stand up for what's right even when it's difficult." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "Last week, I discovered that my wife was operating an illegal business that was harming families in our community. I had a choice: stay silent and protect my own reputation, or speak up and protect the people being victimized." "But you destroyed your own family in the process," called out Martha Brennan from the audience. Her face was red with embarrassment and anger. "No, Mrs. Brennan. My wife destroyed our family when she chose to commit crimes and betray the trust of everyone who cared about her. I just refused to be complicit in that destruction." "What about your children?" This from Dr. Hayes's wife, a woman whose husband's participation in Jessica's activities had been detailed in the newspaper. What kind of father exposes his own children to this kind of scandal? The question hit me like a physical blow, but I'd been preparing for it. The kind of father who refuses to teach his children that loyalty means covering up crimes. Ben and Lila are learning that actions have consequences, that integrity matters more than reputation, and that sometimes doing the right thing requires personal sacrifice. And what about the families you've destroyed? Dr. Yi. Hayes himself stood up, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. My practice is ruined. My marriage is over. My children won't speak to me. Was your revenge worth all that collateral damage? I looked directly at him, feeling no sympathy for a man who'd paid to cheat on his wife and then blamed others for his exposure. Dr. Hayes, I didn't destroy your family. You did that when you decided to pay my wife for sexual services. I didn't ruin your practice. You did that when you chose to engage in illegal activities that violated your professional ethics. And I didn't end your marriage. You did that when you betrayed your wife's trust. The auditorium erupted in shouting and arguments. Some people supported me, others condemned me, but everyone had an opinion about what I should have done differently. Principal Harlow banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. Enough, she finally shouted. This is not a trial, it's a school board meeting. We're here to determine whether Mr. Granger can continue to effectively teach in this community. The debate continued for 2 hours. Parents argued about whether I was a hero or a vigilante, whether my actions showed integrity or vindictiveness, whether my personal scandal made me unfit to teach their children. Through it all, I sat quietly, letting them decide my fate. Finally, the board called for a vote. By a margin of 4-3, they decided to place me on administrative leave pending the resolution of the criminal cases against Jessica and Todd. It wasn't the vindication I'd hoped for, but it wasn't the condemnation I'd feared either. As the meeting broke up, Lucas approached me with Ben and Lila in tow. My children looked shell-shocked by the public spectacle, but they came to me without hesitation. Dad, Ben said quietly, are you okay? I hugged them both, feeling their solid reality anchor me after hours of abstract debate about my character and choices. I'm fine. We're all going to be fine. When is Mom coming home? Lila asked. I knelt down to her level, choosing my words carefully. Mom made some very bad choices, sweetheart. She's going to have to face the consequences of those choices, which means she won't be coming home for a long time. Because she was stealing money and hurting people? I stared at my 11-year-old daughter, amazed by her ability to cut through adult complexity and see the simple truth. Yes, because she was stealing money and hurting people. Then she deserves to be in trouble, Lila said matter-of-factly. That's what you always taught us. Bad choices have bad consequences. Ben nodded in agreement. Dad, we know this is hard for you, but you did the right thing. Mom was hurting people, and you stopped her. Looking at my children, smart, moral, resilient kids who understood justice better than most of the adults in that auditorium, I knew that whatever else happened, I'd made the right choice. Jessica could take our money, our reputation, even our home, but she couldn't take the values I'd instilled in Ben and Lila. We drove home through the quiet streets of Millfield, past the closed spa with its dark windows and permanently closed sign, past the houses of families whose secrets had been exposed, past the normal life I'd thought we were living just a week ago. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, legal proceedings, financial struggles, the long process of rebuilding our lives without Jessica. But tonight, I had my children, my integrity, and the knowledge that sometimes the right choice is also the hardest choice. As we pulled into our driveway, Ben asked, Dad, do you regret what you did? I thought about Jessica in a jail cell, about Todd facing rape charges, about the families torn apart by the revelation of their secrets, about my own uncertain future. Then I looked at Ben and Lila, who were learning that their father was someone who stood up for what was right even when it cost him everything. No, I said. I don't regret it at all. Epilogue. The final lesson. 6 months later, Jessica pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Todd received 5 years after additional victims came forward with evidence of sexual assault and drugging. The civil lawsuits from their victims would keep them in debt for decades, assuming they ever managed to rebuild their lives after prison. The school board voted to reinstate me after the criminal cases were resolved, though several families transferred their children to other schools. I understood their decision. Some scandals leave permanent stains, no matter how justified the original actions might have been. Ben and Lila adapted to our new reality with the resilience that children possess when they feel secure in their parents' love. We sold the house to pay legal bills and moved into a smaller place on the other side of town. The kids changed schools to escape the constant whispers and stares, but they never complained about the sacrifices required by my choice to expose their mother's crimes. On a cold February morning, I stood in front of my new classroom at Millfield Elementary, teaching 5th grade instead of high school English. The pay was lower, the prestige minimal, but the work was honest, and the children were young enough to judge me by my actions as their teacher, rather than my history as a scandal's central figure. "Mr. Granger?" asked a 10-year-old named Emma. "Why do people sometimes do bad things even when they know they're wrong?" It was the kind of question that children ask with perfect innocence, not knowing they're touching on the fundamental mysteries of human nature. I thought about Jessica, about the choices that had led her from legitimate business owner to convicted felon, about the moment when ambition had become greed and greed had become criminality. "Sometimes people convince themselves that what they want is more important than what's right," I said finally. "They tell themselves that the rules don't apply to them, or that they deserve special treatment, or that nobody will get hurt by their choices." "But people always get hurt by bad choices," said Marcus, a serious boy who reminded me of Ben at that age. "You're absolutely right, Marcus. Bad choices always hurt someone, even if the person making those choices doesn't want to see it." "So what do you do when someone you love makes bad choices?" This from Sarah, whose parents were going through a messy divorce. I looked at these children, innocent, trusting, trying to make sense of an adult world that often seemed arbitrary and cruel, and gave them the only answer I could. You love them, but you don't help them hurt other people. You try to protect the innocent, even if it means making hard choices yourself. And you remember that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good, but it's still the right thing to do. The children nodded solemnly, filing away this lesson about moral complexity for future reference. Someday, they would face their own impossible choices, their own moments when love and justice seemed to be in conflict. When that happened, I hoped they would remember that sometimes the people we love most are capable of causing the most harm, and that true love sometimes means saying no. After school, I drove to the cemetery where my father was buried. He'd been a simple man, a mechanic who'd worked honest jobs his entire life, who'd taught me that a person's character was measured by what they did when nobody was watching. I'd disappointed him in many ways over the years, but I thought he would have approved of my choice to expose Jessica's crimes. "I kept my family together the only way I could," I said to his headstone, "by refusing to let it be built on lies." The wind picked up, scattering dead leaves across the frozen ground. Winter was ending, spring was coming, and life was moving forward, with or without my permission. Ben was applying to colleges, Lila was discovering her talent for writing, and I was learning to be both mother and father to children who deserved better than the hand they'd been dealt. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Paula, the spa employee who'd first contacted me about Jessica's activities. She'd moved to Portland and was working as a medical receptionist, trying to rebuild her life after being caught in the wreckage of Serenity Springs. Saw the news about Jessica's sentencing. "How are you holding up?" I typed back, "We're doing fine. How about you?" "Better every day. Thank you for having the courage to do what needed to be done. A lot of people are living better lives because you spoke up." I put the phone away and drove home to my children, who were waiting with homework questions and stories about their day and the simple, honest needs of young people learning to navigate the world. Whatever else I'd lost in the past year, Money, status, the illusion of a happy marriage. I'd kept the things that mattered most. That evening, as I helped Lila with her math homework and listened to Ben practice his guitar, I realized that this was what victory looked like. Not revenge, not vindication, not the satisfaction of seeing enemies punished, but the quiet knowledge that I'd chosen my children's future over my wife's crimes, truth over comfortable lies, integrity over easy silence. Jessica had called me a small-town nobody, and maybe she was right. But this small-town nobody had refused to let his family be destroyed by her ambition, and in the end, that refusal had saved more than just his own children. As I tucked Lila into bed, she looked up at me with Jessica's green eyes, but with a moral clarity her mother had never possessed. "Dad, I'm proud of you for stopping Mom from hurting people." "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything to me." "Will you tell me the whole story someday?" "When I'm older." I kissed her forehead, thinking about the conversation we'd have in a few years when she was old enough to understand the full scope of her mother's betrayal and the complexity of my response to it. "Someday I'll tell you everything. But for now, just remember that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing." She nodded sleepily and closed her eyes, trusting in the simple faith that children have in parents who've proven themselves worthy of that trust. I turned off her light and walked downstairs to my kitchen, where I poured myself a small glass of bourbon and sat at the table where this whole story had begun. The credit card statements were gone, replaced by bills I could actually afford and financial records that held no secrets. The house was smaller, the furniture older, the future less certain, but everything in it was honest. Outside, snow began to fall on the quiet streets of Millfield, covering the town in clean white silence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons to teach, new opportunities to choose between what was easy and what was right. But tonight my children were safe, my conscience was clear, and the truth had finally set us all free. 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 All free.